Hello and welcome to the Bulbous and Outdoor.
We got a YouTube channel now, so you got to say, "Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe."
Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe. We're the Bulbous and Outdoor Chronicles. We're two brothers. Now I forgot how it goes. You threw me off my rhythm.
Two brothers who love the outdoors, spend most of our free time and money on our ventures.
From working all week
to playing all weekend.
We find ourselves surviving the week to live on the weekends. Well, I butchered that intro, but well, we'll get it. So, you guys don't know what time it is. Could be light, could be dark. We're recording another episode. We might record this in 2022. We don't know. Anyways, it's bow season, and we figured we'd talk about struggles we're going through with all the information, misinformation, the rumors. You talk to A, B, and C. They all tell you different answers on your bow. Everybody's in the shop getting their bow tuned, getting their arrows. Stuff's busy. Right before it's time to go out and chase your trophy bull.
Right. And it's one of those things where out of sight, out of mind, right? You put your bow away last year, and then you realize that day's coming, I got to get shooting again. And then that means you got to get tuned again. And both the bow shops that we've been to were packed.
Yes, they were.
Packed. And we still have, 2-3 weeks before season starts?
Yes, but it's closing fast.
I can't imagine how busy those shops are going to be right before.
Yeah. And the last 2 years, I haven't had a bow. Well, I've used a bow, but mine I didn't have. And my riser was bent and figured it out.
So how do you figure out that your riser is bent on your bow? What were your arrows doing?
I couldn't get it to paper tune. Like, I was shooting okay with it, and then I was shooting off one day. I was shooting okay, shooting off. And then there's like bare shaft tuning, there's broadhead tuning, there's paper tuning, there's blah, 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 blah. And there's
how deep do you want to
there's some
dive down the rabbit hole?
Each one, right? And I'm like, how the fuck were guys shooting stuff in the 60s before all this stupid stuff was out? But
bows were better back then, I guess.
Long story short, my riser and my sight, or not my riser, my rest and my sight were clear into my riser. So much so, I'm like, they're maxed out and I'm still not getting paper tuned. So that's when I'm like, I got to take this in. And the first guy I walked into, he's like, yep, your riser's bent. And I'm like, how do you know? And he's like, look at it. And as soon as you looked at it, you saw it was bent. I'm not familiar with bows or anything, so it was kind of a,
duh, I should have looked at
face palm. Duh, this is how. And I'm like, oh, right, so how do we straighten it? And he's like, nah, it's done.
And this was a aluminum bow?
Carbon bow. Actually, it was by Bowtech. It was their carbon overdrive. I got it as a Christmas present. It was a used bow. It wasn't new to me. I called Bowtech. They wouldn't help me with it just because I wasn't the original owner.
Oh, their warranties for original purchaser.
Yeah, so I'm like, well, can I just buy a new riser off you? And they're like, no, we don't sell just the riser, copyright, whatever it was. I'm like, I don't want to buy a whole new bow just for a riser. Okay, maybe it was something I did. Well, the more I researched it, those bows, Carbon Overdrive, Carbon Night, I think was one of them, Carbon Icon. Now they have the something Rose, the Carbon Zion. All that frame is a carbon bow. I loved it. It's super lightweight, but it's not a true carbon. It's like and I'm going to butcher this. I don't remember. This was 2 years ago. I read all this, but it's like a polymer or a resin carbon. And if it gets hot, you leave it in your car or you're hunting it with it on a hot day, it can bend. You don't really experience it if you're shooting a lighter draw weight, but I had it tuned up all the way. I was shooting like 76 pounds with it. I think that's what it pulled at the store. So I think a combination of that bent that riser, and it's a common problem with them, and a big issue that Bowtech really hadn't addressed. Like the only thing was if you bought the bow originally, they were replacing them, which was good.
All right.
But obviously a design flaw.
Well, you spend that much money on something, you expect some level of quality or it's going to last you X long, right?
Yep.
And for it to not, which it sounds like it's not like you abused the bow, just the circumstances of how it was built. They had this issue. So, did you hunt with it at all?
Yes.
And
the year before,
didn't get anything or didn't know it was bent. Had it paper tuned.
It was shooting good.
Okay.
It's that next year, same time of year, took it out of the box and went,
something's not right.
Holy crap! I'm not hitting like I used to.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's how I stored it or if it just sat under that much tension for a year in the closet that it bent it. What? But I'm not here to like bad talk bow tech. That just was in the bow I'm actually borrowing or did borrow was a carbon icon. So it's the same frame. I did turn it up to my weight and it started to bend the riser. So I turned it back down. It didn't bend it where you couldn't tune it, but it did start to that bottom started to tweak. And so for all those watching out there, if you are shooting a heavier draw length, I'd stay away from that line of Bowtech, those carbon risers or the carbon polymer. They have a carbon one now that's a true carbon bow that I haven't shot. I can't speak on, but it's different than those original first carbon resin bows they had made.
And then I remember we ordered a used bow off eBay.
Because it had the same riser as mine, and I thought, I'll just switch the limbs and blah, 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 right? And we got that, and it was bent.
Yeah.
Not as severe as my first one, but it was already starting to bend, and I'm like, nah, we sent
Well,
it
even
back.
the string wasn't when the string stopped centered. I mean, you could tell that it was off.
That's another way on those bows. If you look down them and that string is not sitting on that string stop in the middle, it's off, there's an issue. It might not be your riser bending. Well, on those, you couldn't really move the cams too much. So maybe it is the riser, but that's not the only thing that can cause that string to be off center, if you will. But yeah.
But I just want to thank eBay customer service because getting that done, I mean, you buy something, looking at a few pictures of it, you don't know, but after we took it to professional and we could see that line was off, they were really good about getting that returned. And the guy wasn't super happy, the seller, but, I was just honest with him. Like, I don't want to buy a bow that's bent.
Starting to bend.
Yeah, and I don't think he had any preconceived notion. Yeah.
No. And it probably was shootable, but it was one of those things that started, and it was like, I don't want to
do this again.
Yeah. So I borrowed another bow, and this whole time, these last 2 years, I'm like, I got to buy a bow. I got to buy a bow. So I go into the bow shop, and I'm reading all the crap and doing all the research, of the bows this year. And I don't need a brand new bow. I could do a couple-year-old bow, but then you're looking used, and I waited the last minute, and blah, blah, blah. So I go in, and we buy Holly a bow. We ran out of time. I had a corporate meeting.
Kind of like shopping for puppies, right? You don't go there without.
I went in to shoot bows for me, and there was one she kind of liked, and I wanted her to start shooting just because this time of year we're going to spend a lot of time at the range. So she might as well have something to go, right? Otherwise, she's just not going to be hanging out with me.
Right.
And that's one of her things. She's like, I just want to do stuff with you. Well, if you're going to do stuff with me, you're going to need a bow. So she buys a bow. All great and dandy. I go to another bow shop to try test shooting some bows because I had a little bit of time. I'm going to shoot each one. I've been saving up money. I'm going to buy a new bow. I'm going to drop some money. But the deal with Holly, there was two. Number one, I'm not buying a used bow again because she was tired of seeing all that money going out
effort and
then it not being able to go to warranty. So she's like, you're going to buy a new bow. In case something happens, it's covered by the lifetime warranty. Right. Number two, she's like, after we get married, you can buy a bow.
That's how she forced you into the whole marriage, huh?
I think it was more of a finance thing.
Oh,
right. Like we had to afford the wedding before I bought a bow.
Fair enough.
So met the two qualifications, but when I was in, it was actually Shields here in town. I shot a few bows, and I was looking on the rack, and I really wanted, with all the research, because someone I got measured by 2 different people measured me at 32. Right? And so when I was shooting bows, I was shooting at 32, and they're like, it looks long on you, it looks long. So we dialed it down. I ended up being 30 and a half. And then I had more people measure me 30 and a half. Then I found calculations online, 30 and a half. I got the engineer brain, so the math really convinced me. So I guess I'm 30 and a half, which is still...
That's nice, though. It's on the longer side, but more bows would fit your
more
draw
bows.
length.
It was nice, but not nice. When I was 32, I only had to select from like 3 or 4 bows.
Fair enough.
Right? And then they're like, oh, you're 30 and a half. And I'm like, oh, shit. Now I got to look through like every single bow. Yeah. So in true engineer style, I had an Excel sheet. You saw it. I highlighted all this stuff, compared them, gave them scores. Did it help? I don't think the scoring necessarily did, but learning all that I did,
look for,
yes, helped.
Kind of organize it.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a big nerd alert. As soon as you're like, I got an Excel spreadsheet with the bows ranked. They have a ranking system.
How fast they were, what poundage they went to, limbs, axle to axle, all that.
So how did you make your decision?
I really wanted the Revolt XL when I thought I was drawn 32 inches. Had good axle to axle, had a short brace height. They clock it at 358 feet per second, which is cooking, but that's also, it had a 33-inch draw length. So it's not shooting that fast if you're not 33. But still, that's pretty cooking. So that's what I went in and shot, and I liked it. And then they're like, oh, you're 30 and a half. You don't have to be in a Revolt XL. Shit. So I go into Shills the next day, looking at bows, shooting them. And I look on their used rack, and there's a Revolt XL, and it's in the camo I like. It's used, but I'm like, if I buy it through Shields, there's probably some warranty that Shields is going to give me, because they're not going to sell me a defective bow. So I pull it off the shelf. I'm like, oh, I'll get you, and I noticed on the tag it said Revolt X, and I'm like, they probably were lazy, or it's a Revolt XL.
They ran out of ink.
Or someone just typed it quick, like abbreviated it. Couldn't type the 1 extra L. I don't know what I was thinking. And I'm looking at it, I'm getting all excited, and then I realize, slowly it dawns on me, it's a fucking left-handed bow. And I was like, still excited, because you have been shooting a bow, and you weren't in the market for a bow.
No.
But what bow are you shooting?
It's a 2002 Black Knight 2.
From Bowtech.
So the cams on it are like... The cameras there about
not even that big. They're they're tiny.
Small. It's 65% let off compared to like 80.
And the strings are made out of deer sinew, I think, or something.
I'm sure. I wasn't in the market for a bow, Convinced myself this one's fine. I don't need to upgrade.
I send him pictures.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, you should get this bow. Yeah. This is the bow I researched. I wanted to get. They have it used for a really good price. If you're going to buy a bow, like, this is the bow you should get. And you kind of blew me off. You're like, yeah, whatever. I don't need a new bow. You wouldn't even go to Shields with me.
No.
I'm like, you could look at bows while I shoot. And you're like, no.
That's like going to go look at puppies. You don't leave.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know exactly how it happened, but we're like...
That same night, I come home from Shields.
That same night?
That same night, I think Dad calls me and he's like, we're coming over to your house. Garrett bought that bow.
Yeah.
He's pissed about it. You need to talk him out of it.
I was trying to make it to Shields while you were still there so we could kind of talk and I could see what you're thinking for bows. I'm not really in the market now, but when you research something, you do a pretty in-depth look.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of talk to you while you're in it, what you're thinking, what you're looking for in a bow. So I kind of mentioned it to Dad, and I'm like, yeah, I'd like to make it to Shields, Well, in his mind, he's like, we're going to Shields. So you were already left. I'm like, Dad, we don't need to go to Shields. You're already left. And I just want to, we'll just go look. And then there it was. Camo on the shelf, left-handed. I think they had 2 left-handed bows, and that was one of them.
Yeah.
It's like, dang, that's a nice bow. And the price was nice, like for a top, not the tippy top, but a top-tier bow.
It's like a 4-year-old bow, I think.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Pretty good price.
It was yeah.
And I'm like, I can't afford this. I got bills to pay. And then the Shields guy's like, hey, if you sign up for a Shields card, you get $70 off. And suddenly that price was way better.
It was way better.
And
then
no interest for 6 months.
And the old man, the enabler.
The old man, I'm like, Dad, I'd like to have this bow, but I can't. Well, here's what I'll do. I'll loan you the money. Completely enabled me.
Yeah.
I think I miss out on my next like 3 birthdays and 7 Christmases, but it made it happen. He completely enabled it to happen.
Well, I don't know if you know this behind the scenes. I was talking to Dad about the bows I was looking at. And every time he would say, God, I wish Garrett would get a new bow. God, I wish Garrett would get a new bow. And so I think when he's like, oh, Jared sent you a bow that he liked? Oh, shit. And Dad knew I was looking at him. He was kind of like, I want you to, you know. And you drew this nice elk tag this year and probably wanted to shoot something from at least this decade.
Yeah.
You know?
It's funny. I've talked to a couple people that are like, yeah, I shoot an old bow. It's like a 2015.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't think that's an old bow. But no.
So you buy the bow.
I buy the bow.
So I have started this bow journey. I've been in 2 or 3 times. Holly's got a bow. Garrett shows up with a brand new bow. I still don't have a bow. But you got a nice bow.
Yep.
And did you shoot it at Shields at all?
Yep. Couple times.
Tell me that. I wasn't there. How was that?
It was a big step up from what I was at.
Yeah.
Just the drawback smooth, and then you're holding 80%, not 65 let off. And it was fast. Like, completely different animal than what I've been shooting. And in my mind, it's like, I don't need a bow. And then Joe the enabler, the Shields credit card. And it was like, this is happening.
And you shot it, and you're like, holy crap.
It's happening.
Yeah.
That begins my bow journey.
Now, what happened after you bought it? Because Dad called me and said, we're coming to your house. You got to convince Garrett. He's got buyer's remorse.
Instantly sick. Yeah? I mean, I don't have any money, and then somehow getting able to spend a bunch of money on the bow. And then also weighing on my mind is I got to explain to my wife that I just dropped this much money on a bow, even though we both agreed we got to be tight.
You should be like one of our friends. Just say like, yeah, I won it at a work raffle or, you know.
Actually, at Shields, I had the baby there too. And the Shields lady, when I applied for the credit card, she's like, hold on a sec. She kind of reached under the counter and pulls out a little stuffed black lab that's like this big.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I should have just told the old lady that it was like, yeah, it's a $700 stuffed animal.
There you go. Black velvet from the Congo.
To be honest, she was more excited about the little stuffed puppy because it was a lab than my new bow.
Yeah, understandable. But you also, what were you pulling, 60 on your old bow?
Yep.
And now you're pulling 70.
Yeah.
Just because of that let off.
That let off. Well, so much more maintainable. You know, you shoot more than once, you can hold it. You know, it's not.
Plus that Revolt X that you got was it 33 axle to axle?
33 axle.
It's a longer bow
for
the newer bows out. I think there was plenty of older bows that were that long, but newer bows. Because I think your old bow is
a little bit longer.
A little longer than it. But yeah. Yep. So you got the bow. We got it all set up. The next day, I'm like, I need to get a bow. So I went in and I shot a few, and I shot the Matthews Lift. I shot the Hoyt Alpha X. I already shot the Revolt XL. I shot the Bowtech Core SS, and I shot the Bowtech Core SR. And I ended up choosing the Bowtech Core SR for a few reasons. They're all about the same price. I mean, and I didn't look at any carbon bows because I don't think the carbon bows are worth the price jump. The weight, like the only thing you're really getting out of it, I think, is weight. And then people are like, oh, and it doesn't get cold in your hand for the cold days. And I'm like, personally, I'm not really bow hunting when it's super cold out anyway.
Right.
It's not like a concern of mine, but also like it shaved off 0.1 or 0.2 pounds for another $600. Like, no way.
I don't know. I could see some big old elk steps out and you're like, it's pretty cold. My bow would be a little cold on my fingers.
Yeah, I don't want to draw.
I don't know. I feel like Well, it's in that same line of thinking with like backpacking, right?
Mm-hmm.
The more, or the lighter things get, the more expensive they are.
Yeah, but there's a point where how expensive they are doesn't outweigh the extra weight.
Right.
You know,
and then you
that's
had
where
a
the carbon
past
bows are.
history with some kind of, not that the new carbon
Yeah.
bows would bend, but that was also maybe jaded in your head, and maybe a bias where it's like,
Well, not really. I really looked at the Hoyt RX Ultra.
oh, you did?
Yeah, and the PSE Mach 3. Looked at that quite a bit. But I actually disqualified those in my chart.
And based on
I
what?
did two, the weight and their speed. So I did 2 qualifications. I took their price, and I did price per pound, and I did price per foot per second, right? That they're claiming. And none of them were outstanding. There was bows that were more bang for the FPS. You know, not saying that they were faster or that they were lighter. Actually, the Matthews Lift is the lightest bow, and it's aluminum. So the Lift, $800 cheaper than the Hoyt RX Ultra, but it's 4 pounds, and the Ultra is like 4.5 pounds. You know, so I get just, I don't know. I'm not on the carbon. If I did like my carbon resin bow, but I learned very quickly, especially with the new aluminum bows, they're totally fine. But I ended up choosing that Hoyt Bowtech Core SR for a few reasons. I don't mind a heavy pole bow. I know there's probably people out there that are like, you want this smooth, blah, blah, blah. And my thinking is, if I can pull it by the time season hits, I pull it pretty smooth. Like I got a target at the house. I shoot every day after work. Like,
right.
You know, I'll get there.
It's not about comfort for you.
No,
it's not about
comfort.
Getting an efficient killing machine, basically.
Yeah, and that can roll into our next topic too, why I chose the Core SR and why I thought the Revolt was really good. When I'm looking at a bow, I'm looking how fast that bow shoots. I'm not a speed guy, but how do I put this? The way to know how much energy that bow can produce, an easy indicator is how fast they advertise the speed. And it's like IBO or ATA, and I don't know the acronyms or what, but usually they take like a 300 grain arrow or 350 grain arrow, okay, and they shoot it in whatever speed it is. So that Revolt XL, they advertised at 358. Well, at 358, that's maybe a 350 grain arrow at 33 inches, 358. Well, I know that's going to change with my arrow size, but that bow can only produce so much energy when it's turned up to 70 pounds.
Right.
All right. And so the Core SR, it shot the fastest of the ones that I wanted. It shot faster than the XL.
Your indicate. What other reasons did you choose the one you did?
Bowtech, I think, is a little ahead of the game when it comes to tunability. Matthews by far with the riser. I mean, I almost got the Lift, I'll be honest. But I didn't like how much I had to be in the bow shop, because here in town, I really don't feel like there's one guy, if I can get him, he knows his shit. The rest, it feels like, they just picked it up or they've been doing it for a while. Yeah. It's like, I don't feel like I'm someone that's pretty precise. That engineer brain on me, if I can get it to the thousandths of an inch, I'm doing it a thousandths of an inch, and I really like to tweak things. And I just don't feel like the bow shop in town or the few other stores that offer that service do as intricate, thorough as a job as I would do. So that was a big thing. I'm like, I hate taking it to them. I could buy a bow press. I could buy a bunch of stuff so I could work on the Matthews and, work on cam lean and everything, but I need a press for it. Or I can get this Bowtech, and you can adjust with the deadlock cams, which yours has, the Voltex, and you can adjust timing on the Core SR, which is...
So that's good for also you tuning it at home, but also you're in the field, gets bumped or something. Yeah, you're not out.
Or huge temperature swings. It's all tuned up fine, shoot 95 degrees beginning of September. And then I want to use it mid-October, and it's 60 degrees
As long as your hands don't get too cold holding the riser.
Yeah, God forbid I wear a glove. But
no, that makes sense, that tunability. And I think just based on my conversations with you, that's huge. And Bowtech's the only one that really offers that level of
where it's that easy,
without
a bow press.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And they make like emergency bow press is some kind of rig I've seen that you can use, but why not just have it on your bow? Carry it with you. It's always with you. You're 3 miles stocking something.
Yeah, I got one little Allen wrench. Click, click, click. That will probably never happen in the field, but in my yard, it's like I can paper tune at home now.
Right.
I'm not adjusting, and I don't mean just with the rest. I can paper tune at home and move my cams, which is huge.
That is huge.
I don't have to pop it in a vise, pull a cable off, twist it, put it back on.
And then you get used to your bow because you're also doing the work on it. So okay, it's shooting this way. I need to move this way.
Just like your favorite rifle or your favorite fishing rod. You get, intimate with it.
Whoa. Especially like you take it to a bow shop. There's a different guy working on it every time. Everyone kind of has their preference. I think there's a bias depending on who's working on it.
And I went into a bow shop once, and I have a long draw length. And one of the things, and we'll talk about a little bit, is my same kind of mentality with choosing rifle cartridges. I don't want to choose something I can't get at a gas station if I need to, right? I don't want to have an arrow that needs to be specially cut. And I had a long enough draw length. I was fine shooting just whatever came in the box, the length, right? As long as they were all the same length. He cut them for me, and it bugged the fuck out of me. So now I have to get my arrows cut every time. And I did. I balanced my arrows there, so I don't want to change. But before that, it was just like I could go straight out of the carton, shoot those, didn't care. Worked out fine.
How long are arrows typically?
It depends on what brand, what version, all that stuff. And we'll go into my arrow selection here in a bit, too, because this is all my opinion, your opinion on what we're shooting. But what happened to your bow? We went out shooting. You were shooting good.
And it was like a dream. Quite the step up from what I was shooting. Yeah. I'm like, in my mind, I convinced myself I don't need a new bow. And then I got a new bow and I was like, why didn't I do this sooner? This thing is freaking, it's fast. Like, I remember previous years, we'd both shoot at a target at the same time and yours would hit and then mine would hit.
Well, and you could even shoot first and I would shoot second and beat you there.
Right.
Yeah.
And this bow, it was like on the same level as what you were shooting.
Oh, yeah. Yep. For sure.
So,
and even, go on.
I mean, what a dream to shoot. And then you're like, hey, that looks a little weird because you're standing behind me. That string's not coming off your cam straight.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what? Well, am I torquing my wrist? No, fingers are loose. But it's still shooting all right. But it doesn't seem right coming off the cam lean. So you took a picture of it. Like, yeah, that's definitely like way
and my
sideways.
Bow and Holly's bow.
Right. Compared
and was like, yeah, it's definitely kind of coming off
way sideways. So then it was like, oh crap. So we went after shooting, we went back to Shields where I bought it, and we're like, hey, this bow's, coming off. Oh, that's probably your wrist. You're torquing your wrist. And it just happened to be some guy who normally works in the clothing department was helping out in archery, who's also left-handed.
Bow hunter.
He pulled it back. Same thing. Took a picture of him. And he's like, yeah, I see what you mean.
And they couldn't figure it out.
No.
And while you were in there shooting it, there was other people getting helped. And they're all standing there. You would shoot, and they would go, damn, that's a sweet bow. Damn, that's a fast bow. Like, they were just... And I'm like, I know. But they couldn't figure it out.
No. And they said, well, come back tomorrow. Our bow guy, the guy that his name's Jason.
Yep.
I'm not sure of his last name. He'll be in tomorrow. He'll be able to take a look at it.
And he knows his stuff.
Yeah.
Not like some archery head that's like, oh, the moment of this and blah and this and rotation and blah,
Right.
Have you calculated the centrifugal force of the earth when you're shooting this? What degree is the sun at?
I feel like he doesn't have a level of BS that a lot of people have.
No, he's been doing it for 30-some years.
He's not brand specific. He just finds what bow shoots well for him.
Yeah, and he shoots a Bowtech, but I think
it's like 2017.
Yeah, so it's in the teens. I was going to say 2016, but yeah.
Somewhere in there.
Yep, somewhere in there. And so he's not like, I need the newest bow. He's very much like, what do you look for in a bow?
Right.
And even talk. So he was good. he looked through it all, and he's like, yeah, there's something up.
Mm-hmm.
We'll send it into Bowtech for you. So we took all your shit off your new bow, put it back on your old bow, and now you need to shoot your old bow in case this Bowtech stuff takes a month.
Right, which
2 months.
It might, because it's so close to season.
Yeah.
It was kind of a heartbreak for me. Like, oh, yeah, take all your stuff off. We'll send this bow in. I'm like, I got my old bow in the truck. Can we? Yep. And so all my stuff back on my old. It was like an old friend in my hand, but it doesn't perform the same.
Yeah. So fingers crossed. We'll pray you get it back. But if not, old reliable is still there.
Yeah.
So we've had some bad luck with the Bowtech bows, but they're not related. I don't know if it's a quality issue. I'm not familiar enough with bows in general, how many issues they have, and I'm not a brand guy. Kind of seems like I'm a Bowtech guy, but not like I'm a Ford guy because Fords are awesome, everything else sucks. I'm not a Bowtech guy because Bowtech. I'm a Bowtech guy right now because of the adjustability and all that stuff. So if Matthews had it, I probably would have went with Matthews. If Hoyt had it, if Prime had it, if PSE had it, Martin. I mean, I looked at a lot of Bear archery. I think if you're getting into it, you should look at a Bear bow.
They have a lot of good bows that don't break the bank, but I think they shoot pretty well.
Really well. Like their stats were up with all these, I would say, elitist bows. Although they don't list their weights, so I think they're pretty heavy compared to the other ones. But they, as far as speed and all that, they're right there, and they're half the price at anything in that category. So I do think if you're just starting, Bear bow is definitely the way to go. And a lot of people shoot Bear. Been hunting for years, shoot Bear bow. So I'm not saying Bear is entry level, but I thought they were incredible bang for your buck. So
maybe after this bow doesn't work out, maybe I'll dabble in the Bear scene a little bit.
So I want to talk about archery in general and the big kind of concepts around it. There is the big one right now, and this bugs me with rifles too. We won't talk about rifles. We're going to talk about arrows. And bullets and arrows are a little different. When you break the sound barrier, there's a lot of other factors that happen with your trajectories. Your arrows aren't breaking the sound barrier. It's a lot simpler flight mathematically, right? Physics wise. I heard a guy talking today when I was at the pipe store looking for some fittings for work, and he was all excited about his bow. He just got it. It was a Bowtech Revolt X. Shit you not.
Shut up.
That's why I tuned in. I picked that up, and he's from out of state. I can't wait to be elk hunting up here. I just moved here, and I'm thinking,
God damn it.
Fucking, I'd love to bury you in a bridge beam. No. But, yeah, anyways, he was talking about his Bowtech Revolt X, and he's like, yeah, man, I'm shooting 306 feet per second. And I'm like, that's cooking. And I hear him say 350 grain arrows. And I'm like, well, that's why you're clocking at 306. You're shooting light. And even the guy at the bow store, he's like, oh, these guys with the heavy arrows, blah, blah, blah. It's all about your arrow flight, and kind of they're speed guys. They're all about speed.
That's definitely a school of thought. Speed, right? A lot of people are like speed.
306.
They even rate the bows speed.
Yes. So here's what I will say. If you set your bow to a certain poundage, it only has so much kinetic energy it will push. All right? There might be some loss of friction as you turn your bow up, or less friction, it overcomes just in your cams and everything. But for this experiment, I'm saying that's pretty negligible. Okay, so I'm not saying the ratio is going to happen every single time to the dot. It might be off a little bit. For the most part, let's say every time you change your arrow weight, your speed's going to change the same ratio. Because your bow, if you don't change the poundage, you don't change the draw length,
can only push.
Has only that much energy. It's
Makes
stored,
sense.
right? Potential, you click the pin, kinetic. Kinetic energy is, I wrote the equation down. I was going to remember it because I'm super smart. I think it's 1/2 mass velocity squared.
I mean, I don't know it. So
yes, 1/2 mass velocity squared is kinetic energy. So there's a mass component, there's a velocity component. Notice the velocity component is squared. So you double your velocity, you quadruple your energy. And that's why I think people are on velocity big time. They're like, the faster it's going, the better. The faster it's going, it's better. But what they're not understanding is you're not changing the energy of that bow by shooting a faster arrow. All right?
It's the same amount of energy out of a bow. So what changes is how far your arrow carries that energy.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So now you have people talking about, oh, they're momentum guys. They're momentum guys. It's all about momentum. Okay, so the correct way to do this, and I have a little chart here I did. It's in Excel. I'll pull up so I can talk about it as we talk. All right, so my bow, and I chronoed it at the store with my arrows, and I weighed my arrows. My arrows are 509 grain arrows. All right, I shoot 125 grain tip. They're the long range axis long range 4mm shafts, 240 spine, I believe. So I got a 509 grain arrow. My FOC, which we'll talk about in a bit, is 13, which is kind of what they recommend in that window Easton recommends. If I take my velocity and my weight of arrow I'm shooting, I know my mass, I know my velocity, I can calculate the kinetic energy. All right. So my bow's shooting 90.5 foot-pounds of kinetic energy. All right. That means if I go to a lighter arrow, I'm going to be shooting faster, but I have less mass. All right. So someone that's like, well, and 283 I think is pretty fast arrow, especially at 509 grains. That's pretty fast arrow. So I also kind of made this little chart that shows momentum. So I'm shooting 509 grains, 283 feet per second. My momentum is 20 foot-pounds per second. Okay? I know it's a weird unit. No, just think of 20 foot-pounds per second. All right? The equation for momentum is mass times velocity. You see how velocity is not squared? So in momentum, mass and velocity affect momentum the same. Okay? You double your velocity, you double your momentum. Double your mass, double your momentum. Okay? Doesn't have the same relationship as kinetic energy. But what you have to understand is when you're looking at a bow, if you set the grains the same and you're talking about velocities, you're really talking about kinetic energy differences. The faster the bow with the same grain arrow, the more kinetic energy it's delivering to that arrow. But jump to momentum. Momentum's what carries your arrow from you to your target. All right? So a change in velocity changes it just as much as a change in mass. Well, guess what your arrow doesn't do in flight? Change mass. It doesn't speed up, you're right, but also doesn't change mass. The only thing it does is slow down. All right? So what's going to keep that momentum high?
A higher mass.
A higher mass. All right? So just to kind of, excuse me, just to kind of clarify this, I'm getting real excited with my Excel sheets here, if you can't tell. I took my bow, took the kinetic energy, and I said, all right, I'm going to shoot a 350 grain arrow, just like that guy was so excited he was shooting. And again, this isn't an exact science. I am assuming some frictions don't exist, okay? And there's probably a little bit different way it shoots a heavier arrow than a lighter arrow. I think they're negligible. I don't think it's a huge difference, but there probably is a little. If I shot a 350 grain arrow like he's doing, I could shoot it at 341 feet per second, which is cooking, right? But my momentum's only 16 foot-pounds per second. So I'm shooting it fast.
But it's not going to carry that energy as far.
I have 4 less foot-pounds per second to carry that arrow. And then I said, you know, what if that's if I chose 350 grains. Now let's say I just want to shoot 300 feet per second. Like a lot of guys, it's a speed thing, 300 feet per second. Well, with my bow, and if I want to shoot 300 feet per second, I need a 452 grain arrow. The momentum on that is 19, which makes sense because the mass is 450 grains, right? But just by trying to increase that velocity, I lose my momentum. Now, here's where I'm bringing it all together. When your arrow's in flight, the biggest thing, the way it stabilizes itself, has to do with drag. It's drag on the fletchings, drag on your broadhead. Drag's equation is 1/2 the density of the fluid, which would be air, velocity squared times the surface area it's acting on, right? Times the coefficient of friction, which for an arrow would depend on your vanes. I can't calculate that. But my point is the surface area of your arrow and the speed of your arrow affects the drag. The speed is squared. So again, the faster your arrow is going, the way more drag it experiences and slows down. Okay, so now you're getting a huge drag force dropping your velocity faster and faster.
Because you're going faster.
What's going to keep your arrow moving?
The more mass.
The more mass, because that momentum equation, right? So that drag force is pulling on that arrow to slow it down. It's kind of like the faster you try to shoot it, the harder friction or drag force pulls on it, right, to slow it down.
So it's a balance. It's a sweet spot.
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
But a lot of, I guess in the industry, a lot of it's like speed. But it should really be momentum, and then finding that sweet spot.
I heard someone go, oh, there's momentum guys now. I'm a momentum guy, I think, because I got a mechanical engineering degree, and I kind of understand some of the physics of this. All right? Now, let's talk about, you sent me an article. People are shooting really heavy grain arrows. Really heavy grain. Like 950 grain arrows.
Right.
So, for instance, if I change the grains to 950 with my bow, I could shoot 207 feet per second, which is still, I mean, it's slow compared to date, but that's a 950 grain arrow, 200 feet per second. That's pretty fast.
It's a lot going.
My momentum on it is 27, so it increases it by 7 foot-pounds per second. All right. So you talked about this balancing act. Obviously, you can't shoot a slug bug out of your bow. There's a point where that arrow is just too heavy.
Right. Can't get distance or doesn't care.
Yep. I am under the impression you want to pull as much weight back as you can and shoot the heaviest arrow you can that flies well. All right. So when you're designing your arrows, if you get too heavy at the tip, you will really just be, there's no real arrow flight. You just kind of drop them out of your bow.
And that's that FOC that you mentioned earlier?
FOC is something they've come up with. Basically, do you have an arrow? Basically, what you do is you take your arrow, and FOC is the percentage of weight on the front half of your arrow. So what you do, an easy way to calculate it, is you find your balance point of your arrow. Okay, that's pretty close. And you measure that from your knock point to there, and then you measure from here, and you don't measure your tip, you measure the end of the arrow. Okay, and you divide them. There's an equation. It gives you a percentage. So for instance, mine was 13%, like on the dot, weirdly, or at least rounded. The calculator I typed it in. That means that 13% of my arrow weight is on the front half of this arrow. And Easton recommends you be 10 to 15%. Those heavy arrows you were looking at, heavy grains, they're pushing like 20% of the weight up here. And I don't necessarily disagree with them. As long as 50% of your weight's not up here, you still need that arrow to fly right. All right. I truly believe that the more mass you shoot, the more penetration you're going to get. And that's what they're all about, is penetration.
Right. It's Ed Ashby is the guy that did it. And a lot of it's like African game. You're shooting Cape buffalo. You're shooting big, thick-hided animals.
And maybe not super far.
Right.
Yeah. You just want to penetrate.
Right.
what happens when you have those higher FOCs is you don't get to shoot as far. Just like a heavy grain bullet.
Right.
And bullets are a little different because there's like
more factors.
There's a lot more factors, you know. There's ballistic coefficients when you get in where you don't really have that with arrows. So the heavier your arrow gets, obviously, the shorter it's going to go. But the longer it's going to carry energy, if that makes sense. So you might not be able to shoot as far, but when it hits the ground, it'll hit the ground with more energy than the other one.
Makes sense. Or your target, same thing.
Yeah. So you're going to penetrate more. You're just
because more energy is arriving at the sight, even though it shoots slower.
Yeah.
Because it's the mass.
Mm-hmm. Now we get into accuracy. What affects accuracy? How accurate are the arrows when they're that heavy? If you get a really heavy arrow versus a really light, fast arrow. Goes back to momentum. Momentum, moment of inertia, right? They're intermingled, but moment of inertia is the resist to change of something, all right? And it is mass specific. It's really about moving that mass. Think about it, where'd that arrow go? Think about it if you balance an arrow this way or you balance an arrow this way. It's a lot easier to balance an arrow
heavy side up.
Heavy side up. Moment of inertia is way greater because of the length of the arrow than down here. It's resist to change. So shoot a light arrow in wind. The wind's going to affect it a lot more than shooting a heavy arrow.
Makes sense.
All right? So these people that say you want to shoot a light arrow fast, I disagree with. If you're shooting inside, you know, you could really dial that in. But if you're shooting outside at all, why wouldn't you want that extra mass to carry that? Which brings me to another topic. And
you've put a lot of time and research into this.
Yeah, but I would like to hit it with some more math because I'm on to something I think I just quite haven't worked it through. It's been a while since I've been in like
fluid dynamics.
Yeah, all that, drag coefficients, all that. And on an arrow, I don't think you could really do it unless you experimentally did it.
So let's talk about arrow diameter.
All right, and that's what I was leading into.
Okay.
So you shoot, I think this is a 6mm arrow. Yep. This is a Vendetta by Shields.
Yep.
350 spine.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I shoot a little bit longer arrow. Well, not by much. Maybe by an inch.
Hey, that matters.
Only to your wife. Anyways, Axis long range. These are 4mm arrows. All right. So when these are flying, the thought is, you know, the drag equation, there's a lot less surface area for the wind to affect this than there is this. All right. So I have a heavier arrow because I'm shooting a heavier, heavier poundage and a little bit longer arrow. So I'm at a 250 spline. So my grain per inch is heavier. But I'm also shooting a smaller diameter. And we've seen this.
Yep.
Okay, where you were shooting these arrows with your new bow at 70 pounds. Keep in mind, it's probably a little slower than my bow. But I was getting like, not just a little bit better penetration. I was smoking you.
A lot better penetration.
Yeah, shooting the same targets.
Right.
A few things have to do with that. My tip on here, I don't know. They probably can't see. But my tip on this arrow is wider in the front than the back. So when I punch a hole, a lot of the arrow shaft is not having friction, if that makes sense. It's more at the tip, where yours is the same diameter all the way down.
So it's getting
as
friction.
Soon as it hits, it's friction the whole way.
So that's fill points. What about broadheads? Because your broadhead does the cutting.
Yes.
So because that leaves a smaller hole behind your broadhead, does that even matter? Because if your broadhead cuts a hole, I imagine there's still some kind of tissue or flesh that would drag it.
It might. Yeah, I mean, in the end, there's probably some there. I don't know if it's a difference between a dead animal and a wounded animal. But yeah, I mean, I shot an elk with one of these, and I shot all the way through it easy. And it was at 40, well, no, it was 50 yards. I shot that elk. The one I just put an arrow through. And elk barely flinched or whatever, but that arrow went clear through him.
Right. And the whole, I know probably, I don't know if it's relevant now, but there was a school of thought that's like, oh yeah, you stick it in them and then they run. And no, an arrow is made to create damage and then a way that blood can get out of the animal.
Yeah, it's not really meant to sit in there and cut more.
No.
You want to punch that hole.
Right. Same thing when you stab something. If you take the knife out, there's a lot more bleeding. And that's how our arrow kills something.
More
Loss
effectively.
of blood.
Yep.
Right.
So that kind of leads us on to fletchings a bit. Okay. I was kind of on the bus doing a lot of research. I had noticed a lot of guys do not straight fletch their arrows. We don't fletch our own arrows, so ours are straight because that's how you buy them. Does fletching your arrows with an offset or a helical so your arrow spins in air help arrow flight? A lot of them say that spinning, because the conservation of angular momentum, actually straightens your arrow, keeps it better. I think it's a ton of bullshit. Which is because the other day I was kind of for it, right?
When you shoot arrow with straight fletchings, your arrow does spin, doesn't it?
Yep, it spins slightly. But if you have an offset or helical, you can get it to spin really fast. All right. And this is why I think people are full of shit. Now, I'm not an expert. And like I said, I want more math time to get through this. But there's a few things. And it really occurred to me with a thinner arrow shaft, right? So, number one, I have a thinner arrow shaft, so I've left surface area from a crosswind. I am already under the impression I want to shoot a heavy arrow. All right, so that's how I'm combating the crosswind and the accuracy. I'm shooting a nice heavy arrow that just does its thing if my bow's tuned right. If I were to put spin on this, I think I would shoot, I mean, I would need to tune my bow a little differently, but I think it would shoot just as accurately. The reason, and people say angular momentum. Angular momentum is based off of the radius, okay, the mass off the axis of rotation. So, bear with me here. If your arrow is rotating about this axis straight down the middle of it, this is a 4 millimeter diameter. So I have a 2 millimeter radius. And what's the mass on the outside of this carbon arrow? Not shit. So how fast angular momentum is, I have it written down here, rotational inertia multiplied by angular velocity. So your rotational inertia is your mass times the radius, which is 2 millimeters squared. So 2 squared is 4. So we have 4 times the mass that I'm rotating, right? That's not a big number. I am getting such a small amount of angular momentum unless this fucker is spinning fast as shit. Now, a lot of people say it's a gyroscopic effect or kind of like bullets have. That's why you have rifling. And that's what I thought. It made sense to me. Spin it. There's a few things about bullets that do not apply to arrows.
Well, let me play devil's advocate a little bit. What about a airsoft gun or BB gun, right?
I'll get into that.
All right.
I'll get into that, okay? So, a bullet is rifled. First off, it's very short, and its center of mass is actually behind the halfway point. So, it is not it doesn't like to fly good or fly well. So, if you spin it, it takes that out of it. But you got a bullet's flying 3,000 feet per second, and it's spinning 180,000 revolutions per minute. So, I mean, it's cooking to stabilize that bullet.
Ball game versus an arrow.
Whole different. I don't think you can get enough spin to really make that angular momentum have a effect. All right? And then there's all these articles about, do you want it to spin right or do you want it to spin left? And it's like, I don't really think it fucking matters.
Both ways.
I want it to go straight. Right? Now, the other thing with this angular momentum is, how does that arrow spin when you have helical or back to normal momentum of this arrow? Just a mass. Think of it as a mass flying through the air. The only thing that's slowing it down is drag. If you have offset or helical vanes, they're just like a propeller. What is spinning that arrow? It is catching the air as it rushes through. The air is pushing on the vane, and it's turning that forward motion into angular motion, so that your drag increases quite a bit. So when you spin an arrow, the faster you get it to spin, the more drag you have. And that's what I think controls the arrow more than the angular momentum, is when that arrow's starting to spin, it actually creates more drag in your fletchings and slows your arrow down faster, and it keeps it point forward more. People like it with broadheads, especially solid, broadheads, not mechanical points, because that when you have a solid broadhead, it will steer your arrow, right? But if you spin it, the fletchings have a more of a drag
than the broadhead
effect than the broadhead, and they will continue to steer. You'll have more steering in your fletchings than your broadhead, if that makes sense. So my personal opinion is, if you want to get into it and spend a ton of time, it makes you feel better, you can do it. But I don't think it's going to change your shooting dramatically. Now, to your comment you made about the airsoft guns. Airsoft guns work. It's actually called, and I looked this up, the Magnus effect. Okay? So I don't know if any of you guys airsoft. We used to quite a bit. But an airsoft gun has a hop-up unit. What that does is it puts spin on the BB. It puts backspin on it. When you put backspin on a BB, it comes out of the gun and it floats for a while and then drops off. What's happening there is, with that BB spinning, where it's going against at the bottom of the BB, as it spins, it's going against the flow of air, more friction, right? At the top, it's going with the air, less friction, less pressure. It rises that BB. You can do it with like a pen. If you guys take a pen at home, take the cap off, just have the tube, and you push this down and flick it off the table. I don't know if a camera will pick it up. It'll fly like a BB.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it has that effect. Your arrow is not spinning in the direction of travel, so it's not going to get a lift effect. But what it will do, if you have a right-hand spin and you have a wind coming this way, your arrow will drop. If you have a wind coming this way, your arrow will rise.
It's won't that keep same thing, but you're not going the direction of travel.
It's in the crosswind. All right? So the more spin you have, the more it could move your arrow up and down, left and right with a crosswind. So is the spin better? And then there's some people say that spinning that arrow that fast makes it shoot straighter in the wind. Again, I'm not an expert on this. I haven't done tons of experiments to see. I'm just kind of going by some basic physics principles on it. So if it was me, after all said and done, if I designed my arrow, and there's a few more things to talk about, I guess, too, but heavy arrow, thin arrow. If you want to be cool, you can do some helical fletching. Otherwise, I think if my bow's turned right, I could shoot just as good as someone shooting helical fletched arrows. I think it's one of those gimmicks. It's a fad that'll pass, and we'll go back and, in 5 years from now, it'll be like, only goose feathers can be fletched because they have,
the special essential oil.
Yeah, it'll be some stupid shit. So, yeah.
So, with that, people have been killing animals with bow and arrows for thousands of years. The technology's come a long way, but how far do people have to go down the rabbit hole? I mean, you did the math. You found the most efficient arrow for your bow, but you can kill an animal without that level of detail, I guess. Correct?
Yeah. The reason I deep dive into anything, because I like to learn. I like to apply common sense, some math to things. And, I could be wrong. We could have an episode next week, and I'm like, yeah, I had no idea what I was talking about. But for the average Joe, and I would say I'm the average Joe, except I have ability to obsessively research stuff. I think it depends on what you want out of your bow. All right. If you are target shooting competition, you probably want to fine tune everything to the knees. If you're like me, I'm just hunting. I still want to fine tune everything to the knees. But there's some things that I think are just, you're wasting your time. You're not going to notice a difference. If you were a machine shooting it same each time, maybe. But the human
There's
error
so
factor,
much.
you're not going to see that big of a change. Helical fletchings, I'm not sold on. I might in the future be sold on them. I kind of want to buy a Fletcher
to try
it and see. And I would use the same straight, these Blaze fletchings that come on my, store-bought arrows, and just see, offset them, put them on helical, and just see what it's like on a windy day. Go out and see, and maybe that'll kind of change my mind. But I think the helical stuff is crap. I think if you are wanting to shoot an arrow based on speed, you're thinking about it backwards. I think you should calculate the kinetic energy of your bow, which is easy. Google kinetic energy calculator, type in your specs.
Nerd.
You don't have to retype the equation. Just type it in a calculator. I think Easton Arrows even has one. Type in your arrow grains and your speed. Look at your kinetic energy and then go, what is the slowest FPS I'm willing to do? And if you're like, if I could shoot 250 feet per second, look at what grain of arrow will do that with your kinetic energy, right? Because at some point, speed is nice, just getting to the animal, especially if you're shooting distance. So when it comes, you're asking me to try to wade through some of this bullshit. I think it depends on what you're doing. If you're shooting out of a tree stand and you're like 35 yards is like the longest shot you have, you don't need to do any of this shit. No way. With the bows now. I mean, you're shooting, say, 250 plus FPS and 30 yards. As long as your bow's tuned, none of this shit will matter to you. If you're someone that's target shooting 100 yards, 120, 150 yards, whatever those target guys are doing now, some of this will come into, effect.
You're shooting target. You're not going for penetration. You're just going for accuracy.
Yeah, but I think a heavier arrow will help with accuracy.
Fair enough.
If it's tuned right.
Less. Okay.
Yeah, I'm a momentum guy all the way.
You're one of them.
Well, you have a little 5'10" chick hit a 6'6" dude, and then vice versa, right? There's there's more energy there, but slug bug versus a semi truck going 10 miles an hour. There's a whole much more energy stored in that arrow when you're going that fast. But for someone like you or I, and I think we probably comfortably shoot 60, I think we do want to look at making sure our bows are tuned and shooting the heaviest arrow we can. Going back to my theory on bullets, buying them at a gas station, I'm a little hesitant to go jump on the boat to these 950 grain arrows just because they're expensive. It takes forever to buy them. I like being able to go to my outdoor shop. My arrows are there. Mm-hmm. If I need 12 more, I can go get 12 more.
Right.
So I'm as the average guy, I don't think you need to do any special fletching. Here's another thing we didn't mention. Wraps, arrow wraps. I think that's another fucking...
They make arrow wraps, huh?
Yeah, you wrap the back of your arrow, and you can get cool decals and shit. It helps find them because they're not black. Some people say it helps the veins stick better, blah, blah, blah. I think it's just another thing to add to your arrow. However, you could use wraps if you're really trying to balance your arrow and get an FOC. Like if you have a really heavy tip you want to shoot and 150, 200, 250 grain tip, and you need a little bit more weight in the back because your arrows, you could arrow wrap it there. But other than trying to balance the arrow, I think they're it's like painting your fingernails. They look cool. Last part of the arrow, Nocks. Lighted Nocks all the way. I'm a lighted Nock guy.
Yeah.
They're fun to shoot. You can see where you're hitting, especially when it gets dim out. You see that green, red, pink, whatever go flying. I'm a lighted Nocks guy.
Even for hunting where you hit the animal, you can find your arrow, see what blood's on it.
Yeah, that was a big one for us was, since we're filming a lot of this, if you hit an animal and we're having a hard time recovering it or don't know when we should, we can look back at that video and see right where that arrow hit. And that lighted Nock helps a lot.
Right. I think just purely that in game recovery, I think they're way worth it. I mean, they're definitely an added cost to your arrow, but way, way worth it.
Yep, I think so too. So, yeah, that's kind of my spiel on the math. Let me see if there's anything we haven't touched on. Fletching. Oh, let's talk about broadhead selection.
All right.
Oh, to recap the arrow selection. All right, summarize it. Heaviest arrow you can that you can commonly find at your shop. All right.
Sponsors.
And I wouldn't worry about the fletching, but I would paper tune your bow and everything. Keep in mind, as soon as this arrow leaves your bow, it doesn't give a shit about your bow. It's all about how much energy your bow can put into this thing. And you have to have this designed and balanced so it shoots straight. And the better way to do that, I think, is a thin arrow with a lot of mass. And mine are stiffer because they're longer, but get the appropriate grain for what
Makes
you need.
sense.
Okay, broadheads. Talk about broadheads. You want to talk about maybe some single bevel broadheads?
That's going back to Ed Ashbury.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that? Because even like the Japanese fancy knives are single bevel. Because apparently,
yeah, go on.
That angle is the sharpest angle that you can get.
Yeah.
And when you have two beveled edges, they're pushing against each other. But if you have a single bevel, it's cutting one way, and then you bevel the other side the other way, so then you're getting a rotating action with the bevels basically spinning around each other.
Now, I don't know how much I want my broadhead rotating inside the animal. I don't know if that affects it at all. But maybe it does, like a corkscrew effect, or, kind of pulls it in. I would think of broadheads as this. You don't want your arrow pushing your broadhead in the animal. You want your broadhead dragging the arrow through it. That's heavy broadhead. Now going to single bevel. The reason that single bevel is sharper than anything else is just our ability to manufacture edges. All right. If you think about it, I think about the tightest we can bevel is a 15-degree angle. And that's what those Japanese knives are. If you bevel this side 15 degrees and then bevel this side 15 degrees, your blade is 30 degrees. But if you leave this side flat and bevel it 15 degrees, your edge is actually 15 degrees, right? So that's why it's so sharp. Now, I don't know if I like the blades we were looking at or that you sent me were flat and kind of wide. They look kind of like arrowheads.
Right.
They look cool as shit.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong. But I'm a little concerned with arrow flight, especially in wind, with that broadhead controlling a lot more the flight than the fletching does. And the broadhead will. You put a fixed broadhead on there.
Right.
We're not talking mechanicals. We're talking those fixed single-edge broadheads you sent me. What's your thoughts on mechanical broadheads?
I don't have a ton of experience with a bow. I don't like them because I don't like things that can fail. Like if it fails to deploy, fails to open, that animal's getting wounded. It can make it off the property. I just feel like the simpler an item is, the less likely it is to fail. So a solid broadhead has a failure rate lower than a mechanical broadhead or fixed broadhead does.
Mm-hmm.
With aspects to shooting an animal, I mean, that's huge morally for me because I want the highest chance that animal that I hit is going to go down. And I understand you can get larger cut
wound
circles
cavities
with expandables, but that's if it expands correctly.
Yep. If it expands correctly, yep. And the reason they made mechanicals is so they fly more like your field points.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you have a fixed broadhead, do your broadhead tuning correctly, and you don't have a problem.
Right.
All right. I'm a fixed broadhead guy. I actually did some research on it, and we do shoot some broadheads that I like, but I don't see them anymore in the store. So I think they might be
phasing them out,
or they're going away, and nobody liked them. But I've been shooting Ramcats, 125 grain Ramcats is what I've been shooting, and they have. What I like about them is the blades they're like thin fins. They're kind of pointy. They have a lot less surface area to steer that arrow. I broadhead tuned with them last year with Dad's bow, and it was cake. I wasn't off at all, and once I was on, I was on. Shot an elk with it, and it punched a big hole in that elk. Mm-hmm. And I think it's 1.25 inches.
Yep.
Hole that's making, and then you just unscrew the blades and put new blades on. So I like that too.
Well, the thought of those is they tune like your field point, right? Because the actual head of them
looks
small,
just like a field point. Yep.
And then you just have these thin blades that are sharp on both sides, which I think is important.
They pivot too.
Right. So it's actually like a hybrid between fixed and mechanical.
It doesn't open on impact, though. They can, after it's in there, if it were to pull out, the blades can pop the other way and they cut coming out.
Right.
That could be a gimmick. I don't know if that's...
But we've had good luck with them. Mm-hmm. Even tuning bows, they're straight. You shot an elk. I shot a turkey. Less impressive than an elk.
I shot a turkey with one.
Oh, you shot a turkey with one. But I've just had great luck with them.
I shot 2 elk with them.
Oh, right.
One did not die, which was a shame, but shot right through it. Easy peasy. And then the elk I did recover, I mean, it went, 200 yards, if that. It's hard to tell in those thick willows, but I shot all the way through that elk, too.
Right.
No problem. I think I cut through a rib with one. Now, I will say, and this might be a topic for discussion, unlike those single beveled that are all about breaking bones and penetration, those blades that I have bend, they don't break. So you hit a rib, it might be a good thing. I don't think that blade is getting stuck in that rib. I think it's bending.
But you're still carrying through that animal.
Still carry through the animal, and you might have a slightly smaller wound channel, but it's not stopping. You're getting a pass through because like it's going through no matter what, you know? So yeah, broad or bare shaft tuning and broadhead tuning and paper tuning. We all know what paper tuning is. If you don't know, you shoot your bow through a piece of paper right at the front, and you see how if the tip of your arrow and the fletching of your arrow are going through the paper in the same hole. If they are, that's good. Now, I've heard a lot of people say they bare shaft tune bows. After all the reading and research I've done on it, I think bare shaft tuning bows is hunting bows where you're shooting fixed broadheads. Mechanicals are a little different. If you're shooting fixed broadheads, I think bare shaft tuning is bullshit.
What is bare shaft tuning?
You shoot your bow without fletchings on it, your arrow without fletchings on it, and you make sure it goes straight.
So what's the point of that?
It's kind of like making sure your arrow is straight coming out of your bow. All right? Here's the thing. The broadhead, when you put it in, it's going to steer the arrow anyways.
Regardless.
So you could bare shaft tune your bow, but then when you broad shaft tune your bow, or broadhead tune your bow, whatever you did with your bear shaft will get erased. So broadhead tune your bows, especially if you're shooting fixed broadheads. Otherwise, if you're, and I'm talking hunting specifically, if you're shooting field points all day, you can bear shaft tune your bows, but it's not needed for a hunting bow
because
you're shooting a broadhead.
The broadhead steers it more than.
Yep. I would broadhead tune your bow. I don't think, and there'll be people that argue with me. The comment section is probably gonna be lit up after this. Just how
almost
dumb
as
we
bad
are.
as it's pretty clear.
Yeah, yeah. So, and that's kind of my opinions on the whole archery thing.
With this archery thing, everyone you talk to, at least I've talked to, is like, I'm an expert. You know what I mean?
Yes.
There's very few guys. Jason is one guy where he's just like, this makes sense. Look at these stats. But a lot of people are brand specific, or they read this and then they think they know better. Mm-hmm. And you can even find that with fly fishing a little bit. You kind of get that.
They're both elitist sports.
Elite that I know everything. And to you or I think of us as the jack of all trades, and we're just trying to figure out what works, what makes sense mathematically, and what makes sense like common sense wise. So trying to find that without believing the pile of bullshit, because new bows come out every year and they change. Maybe it's better, maybe it's worse, but the fact of the matter is, if you know your bow, you've practiced with it, you should be able to get an animal and know your arrows.
Yep. And will a light arrow shooting 310 feet per second kill a deer? Yep. But I think your chances of success, and I think it's more moral to shoot something a little heavier. You can kill an elk with a 22. Should you?
Right.
So it's that's kind of where I'm at with the.
Well, bow hunting in large is always, it's not the most efficient way to kill an animal. So
you're going to get a lot of hate for that.
Well, morally, the animal takes longer to die than, say, a gunshot.
Yeah, but people would argue too that they feel it less. You don't have a lot of nerves inside you.
No concussion.
It's not like getting hit with.
But the point
weight.
I'm trying to make is, buy a bow that's suitable for the animal you're hunting.
Yep.
Do the research to figure out which arrows work, practice, and which ones make your bow efficient at humanely taking out that animal.
Yes. And everybody can agree on that.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So the main things are, we talked about a lot today. We each have our own opinions. Get a bow that's going to shoot an arrow accurately with enough energy to kill your animal. Okay? And there's a few ways to go about it. We think you should shoot most poundage you can with the heaviest arrow you can. And then if it's the most poundage you can, it'll be the fastest you can, right? Within reason. You still want good arrow flight. Tune it all up. You should be good. But there's not one magic answer to it.
No.
Different draw lengths, different styles, different.
It's a giant math equation is what it is.
Yep. And I think the place to start is the energy you're going to put out with your bow, and then go into
the momentum that's carried through your arrow flight.
That's how I would do it. I would shoot the heaviest arrow you can with having good arrow flight.
All right. Well, thank you much, Jared, for the in-depth talk and all the math you did on your Excel spreadsheet.
Maybe I'll post it or something.
Yeah, sorry for calling you a nerd.
Yeah.
Be sure to check out our Instagram, TikTok. Full-length episodes are now available on YouTube.
Yep.
So you can watch us talk. Not much exciting, but we both did shave a little bit, so we don't look so.
I had to shave. I was shooting with my beard and it was pulling beard hairs
I still
out.
think you should have did just the half shave. Well, the old lady would have appreciated that.
Just tell her it came out with the shooting. I didn't shave.
Well, until next time,
we'll be
surviving the week
to live on the weekends.